Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and it's a great pleasure to be here. You may anticipate that my remarks today will be a little broader than was when first envisaged, when the title of the subject was agreed more than 2 weeks ago. And you might recognise why 2 weeks ago is quite an important time in British political and, more broadly, British life. So I'm very grateful for Reform for giving me this platform today to talk about the reforms that Britain needs to see. And it's very appropriate because Britain has just voted for reform. I just want to touch first on the referendum, because 2 weeks ago and 2 weeks on from the referendum, it is incumbent on all of us, no matter how we voted, to understand the implications of the decision of the British people and to plot Britain's best future. Now, I voted Remain because I believe there are serious economic risks in leaving. And like others, I made those risks clear. And people decided, decisively, to vote to leave anyway. And I believe yet more strongly in democracy. The House of Commons voted by 554 votes to 53 to hold the referendum. And if you vote for a referendum, then you abide by the result. So we are all leavers now. And all who believe in democracy, however they voted, must respect the result. And I'd say to those, including some lawyers, now complaining about the result, you had your chance to make the arguments. Some of you did. Now the people have spoken. And we live in a democracy, so let's respect the result. And today I want to take a moment to set out some lessons from that result and ask what reforms will be needed to make Brexit Britain the global giant that it can become. Famously, the Leave campaign's slogan was "Take control." The surface meaning was obvious: take control of our borders, our laws, our trade policies, and so on. But it also spoke to a deeper sense of disruption, of dislocation and insecurity, a loss of personal as well as national sovereignty, and the feeling that hard work isn't fairly rewarded, the sense of injustice that some at the top crashed our economy and get away with it, the belief that changes to our economy over a generation help those at the top but not those struggling to make ends meet. And the crucial point is this: many people feel like no one ever asked their permission, that no one ever asked if people were happy to trade comfortable certainties for lower prices in the shops, be happy with free movement of people in exchange for easier access to a huge single market, or be happy to share sovereignty to seek a bigger influence. Political consensus on these questions meant no one asked the people's permission. Until the referendum, that is. And now the nation has decided, through robust, sometimes uncomfortable, but undoubtedly democratic debate. And we in government need to listen, to act, and to bring the nation together. The most important decision now, of course, is who should be Prime Minister. Like so many people, I was immensely sad to see David Cameron resign. I understand his reasons, but I was sorry to lose such an impressive, dedicated and dignified Prime Minister who's achieved so much over so many years. Now Britain needs a Prime Minister with the strength and experience to start straight away. It's vital she can be a unifying figure and not play to just one side of the referendum debate. And having worked with both Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom, I passionately believe that that best person is Theresa May. As someone who put the pros and cons of leaving during the referendum, Theresa can bring the country back together and build an economy that works for everyone. Now, I think that we need to tell some hard truths and level with people. The goal must not be to try to recreate the economy of yesterday, as populists on both the left and the right have suggested. It is neither possible nor desirable to ignore the global economy or the rise of the developing world. Nor is the answer to abandon fiscal discipline as if we've learnt nothing since 2008. But as we seize the opportunities of the modern world, we've got to be better at supporting people through the changes. We must thrive on Britain's technology and talent. We have to support people to change, not to stay the same, insulating them from economic shocks without resorting to economic insularity. And that task is all the more difficult with public trust in institutions so low. Scepticism has been a very healthy British trait, but since the mid-2000s it's mutated into something altogether more corrosive. We've seen the expenses crisis, the banking crisis, Iraq. We saw Whitehall comprehensively fail to forecast the scale of EU migration after 2004. We then saw the government fundamentally fail to prepare the country for the immigration that followed. And to top it all off, England lost to Iceland, a country with fewer inhabitants than Leicester. Thank God for Andy Murray. So since 2010, we've been trying hard to restore that public confidence in institutions, strengthening economic governance through a stronger Bank of England, the Office for Budget Responsibility and Fiscal Responsibility, improving Whitehall with the National Security Council, non-executive boards for departments, and more accountability through transparency, and principally through competent management of the economy, now bearing results. In 2014-15, the UK recorded the fastest rise in average income since the early 2000s, and the strongest employment growth in 25 years. 90% of those new jobs are in skilled occupations. 3/4 are in full-time work. And securing this economic recovery was the central and incredibly successful task of the last Parliament. But now we need to do much more to ensure everybody has the chance to share in this recovery. And today I want to ask what that means for the economy, for the state, and for how the two interact. Leaving the EU requires us to reassess our trade and regulatory policies. Not just that, but to ask some pretty fundamental questions about the way the economy works and on whose behalf. Boston in Lincolnshire, where my grandparents lived, saw the highest vote to leave of anywhere in the country. It's also the place where average weekly wages are £100 below the national average, just £9.13 an hour. There's a deep sense of unfairness felt by many who get up early and work hard for all too little reward, and it's compounded by a suspicion that unjust rewards are flowing to those at the top. In the 1980s, the average CEO pay was around 20 times higher than the average pay of the average worker. Today, it's around 180 times. Now, my party has always had a lot to say to people who want to get on, but historically, we've had much less to say to people who are just getting by, and this has to change. We have to help those who are struggling to share in Britain's success. So what does this mean in practice? How do we design an economy not only where wealth is created, which is critical, but also where opportunity to create wealth is spread? An economy that's dynamic and modern and open and digital, yet also secure and resilient, where companies want to invest, but where a town can bounce back if those companies choose to take their money elsewhere. I believe the answer is twofold. First, to back the disruptors, the people whose innovations enrich our lives, even as they challenge the bottom lines of their more slow-to-adapt competitors. That means, for instance, lower corporation tax, robust competition policy, openness to investment and ideas, and a smart, light regulatory framework that keeps pace with modern technology. But this alone is not enough. Second, we must back the disrupted, the people who find themselves disrupted, in the wrong business, in the wrong town, at the wrong time, on the wrong end of globalization. Now, I'm a strong supporter of moves to improve corporate governance, to rein in corporate excess and ensure companies serve their wider economy. And I believe this is in a long-standing conservative tradition, that free markets are not an end in themselves, but a means of improving people's lives. So we must do more to support the disrupted and make sure that the economy works for everyone. So when a big change hits an area which has high concentration of jobs in one place, that means being prepared to intervene, working with businesses to retrain and redeploy workers, pulling out all the stops to bring new businesses in. It means tilting policy towards pay rises, as we have with the national living wage, so everyone has a chance to share in the growing economy. It means pushing forward on David Cameron's Life Chances strategy so we live in a country where poverty is not destiny and where people can rise as far as their talents can take them. A major part of that, of course, is having the right skills. We need to think of digital skills as foundational alongside English and maths and continue the massive expansion of apprenticeships. And we need to stop thinking that education ends the day after graduation. Graduating, going back to college, to university for a short course, mid-career, gaining qualifications in general purpose skills like creativity and teamwork, skills that can't be automated. These need to become mainstream aspects of our education system. That's how we build a stronger, more resilient, more inclusive economy, by supporting disruptors and the disrupted to get to the future without leaving anyone behind. And I believe that Brexit strengthens the need to ask these questions. Now, it also demands that we rethink the state, and I want to move on to that. The UK government needs to be reshaped to do many things currently done on our behalf by the EU that have been done by them for a generation. There's been a focus, rightly, on the need for trade negotiators to strike the best possible deal with Europe and the deals that we must strike around the world. In competition policy, for a generation, we have executed competition policy under a largely European mandate. Now we need to think about what a British competition policy would look like outside the EU. Since 1990, over 5,000 proposed mergers have been proposed to the European Commission. Just 24 were blocked. Outside the EU, the British state will need not just to implement competition policy, but to set it. Take another example, procurement. For years, any small business selling to government has complained bitterly about the so-called OJU rules for public procurement. They're bureaucratic and inflexible. They increase costs to taxpayers, and worse, they put many small and innovative businesses off from serving the public altogether. Now, EU procurement law is rightly designed to prevent brown paper envelopes in exchange for bridge building contracts. It is not designed to give a fledgling technology company the break they need to take their firm to the next level. Now, recently things have improved. We secured agreement for some improvements at EU level, and with the digital marketplace, we found a way to ensure firms could do the bureaucracy just the once and then sell often into government, rather than repeating the forms time and time again. Outside the EU, we could consider going much further. These are just some of the examples of how the direct way that the British state will be reshaped after Brexit. But there's a big indirect impact too. We'll know only the full impact of the referendum result on our public finances later this year. What's already clear is that fiscal pressure will intensify, and the public's expectation of their public services has never been higher. The already imperative drive to transform government is yet again vital now. We require a nimbler, smarter, more data-driven, more citizen-focused state with services built around the needs of citizens, not the internal logic of Whitehall. For those who imagine that we've reached the end of the road of what can be reformed, let's take a couple of examples. Come with me to our ports. If you want to bring goods into or out of our country, as many as 26 different parts of government have to be informed. Each department or agency has its own inherited systems and processes, its own ways of handling data, and they don't share. It's so complex that many firms employ third-party freight forwarders just to navigate the bureaucracy on their behalf. Some smaller businesses are put off exporting altogether. Well, let's look somewhere else, the justice system. It's 2016, and people still have to turn up to court in person just to confirm their name and address. Meanwhile, the police and the prison service and many other areas of government are still copying information from one piece of paper to another by hand. It's not just the ports and the courts. For some central government services, we estimate that 60% of the cost is the cost of confusion. People applying for a service for which they aren't eligible, or being baffled by the jargon on the form, or chasing up about the status of an application. It means millions of phone calls to government, millions of case files opened, millions of hours wasted. But this problem is eminently solvable. Well-designed digital services can save huge amounts of time, money, effort, and worry We've seen it already with 20 high-value transactions, high volume, that we've transformed in the last Parliament, everything from finding an apprenticeship to applying for a carer's allowance. We're seeing it with cross-government platforms we're building for common activities like payments and notifications and ID assurance. And now we're seeing departments take the methods and the technology to start radically improving the services they deliver. The end goal is a smartphone state, small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, there when you need it, seamless to the point of view of the user. And underpinning this is the central role of data. And I just want to spend a few minutes on this because it's incredibly important. Government's been using data since the days of the Doomsday Book. Nobody who tells you that the data revolution is new has obviously seen that book. But what's new is that now the data we hold can be scientifically analysed, can be distilled into real-world insights, and then fed back real-time into service improvement. Instead of just a written record, it's now a living resource, and this changes everything. Fundamentally, it means we can be more precise, acting on evidence rather than guesswork, using the best artificial intelligence and data science. Here's an example. Our world-class government digital service has built a prototype tool allowing us to see where to target energy efficiency programs. It uses machine learning and combines gas consumption data with local income data to identify priority areas. But the law is outdated, so the data sharing required is currently illegal. But why should we expect often vulnerable people to trawl through the guidelines, tot up the criteria, see if they can claim, then send off their claim to their energy provider, when we, the state, have all the information we need to do it on their behalf? So this needs to change. Responsibly handled data also means we transform silos into systems. Too often, government departments are working on the same issue, serving the same citizens, but for arcane reasons are prevented from working together to achieve a common goal. Instead, each part of government has to reinvent the wheel, commissioning their own data, or worse, making decisions that affect people's lives without access to the data that could tell them whether or not those decisions are right. In the digital age, it doesn't have to be like that. People don't live their lives by the acronyms of departmental silos, and nor should we. So within clearly defined parameters and with strong safeguards, we're now going to change the law in the Digital Economy Bill to allow more sharing within government to improve public services, to tackle fraud, and to measure statistics better. The result will be better value for money and a smarter state. At a time of disruption, we should be using the very best of modern technology and techniques in government to help our fellow citizens manage these changes. And I want to turn to one final point. To deliver on this reform, the civil service needs to be the very best. Smaller, yet more capable. Better managed and more trusted. So tomorrow we're going to be publishing our civil service workforce plan, setting out how we're going to make that happen. It's the next stage of civil service reform, supporting high performers to succeed, attracting the specialist skills departments need, more commercial, more digital, with the civil service a byword for social mobility, where anybody who works hard and wants it can make it to the top. These are just some of the reforms that we need to see. But I have every confidence that Brexit Britain can rise to the challenge, to build an economy that works for everyone, a state that seizes the responsibilities we must now meet, that's more flexible and dynamic, the smartphone state. Let's not flinch from the scale of these reforms. They are fundamental reforms to our relationship with Europe, to the structure of the economy, to the way we do government in this country. But I think that we in Britain are at our best when we are at our most ambitious. After all, seismic political events, technological revolution, and the transformation of government have accompanied each other before in our history. The printing press, the break with Rome, the end of feudalism in one era. Industrial revolution, mass democracy, and the birth of the modern civil service in another. Each time we rise to the challenge, build a better service system that somehow manages to fuse the time-honoured with the cutting edge. And it falls on us now to do so again. Thank you very much.